Hey there, I'm Casey from Pearly White's Dental. How can I help you today?
Hey, I know I'm calling in a little bit late today, but I was hoping to get set up with my first appointment with you guys. Can you help me out?
Absolutely, I can help you with that. To get started, could you please tell me your first name?
Yeah, it's Lucas.
Thank you, Lucas. And what is your insurance provider?
I think I'm with Guardian right now for my insurance provider.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or concerns for Dr. Pearl that I can note for you?
Yes, I'm kind of concerned I have the wrong number of teeth in my mouth. So when I'm in there for my first appointment, can you just make sure that those get counted correctly?
Thank you for letting me know. I will make a note of that for Dr. Pearl. Do you already have a date that would work best for your first visit?
Yeah, can you do this Saturday?
I'm sorry, but I am unable to book appointments on weekends. We only schedule appointments on weekdays. Do you have a different date during the week that would work for you?
Yeah, let's do this Friday.
Let me check for availability on this Friday for you. Great, I have two times available on Friday, July 18th. We have an opening at 8 o'clock in the morning and another at 9 o'clock in the morning. Which time works best for you?
Let's do that 9 o'clock time slot.
You got it. Let me go ahead and book that 9 o'clock appointment for you. You're all set for your first appointment on Friday, July 18th at 9 o'clock in the morning. Please arrive 10 minutes early so we can finish your paperwork. Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you so much.
Great, we look forward to seeing you at your appointment. Have a wonderful day.
We built this AI voice assistant with inspiration from this Reddit user who sold a similar system to a dentist for $24,000 per year.
Hey there, I'm Casey from Pearly White's Dental. How can I help you today?
According to the user, this type of voice agent helps the dentist recover at least 20 to 25 leads per month at an average cost of about $300 per customer. The dentist had no system in place to respond to customer inquiries after hours, so the missed calls and inquiries were just money left on the table. Imagine what this style of basic voice agent could do for thousands of similar businesses out there. How much money is left on the table because you can't staff live humans 24/7. So in the next section of the video, we're going to break down the full n8n workflow powering the system and show you exactly how you can build your own voice agent for your own use case. You can also download this full n8n template with all of the prompts and components for free in our school community. Just click the link in the description and you'll get that. All right, let's jump into the build.
Now, before we go through this automation node by node inside of n8n, there's actually a little bit of setup we need to do inside of ElevenLabs to configure this system to work together. What we're going to be doing is creating a new conversational AI agent inside ElevenLabs that is going to be the entry point into this whole system. And so this agent is going to be responsible for starting off the conversation, capturing some initial patient details, building up all that context it needs to book an appointment, and then once it completes that, it's going to pass that data off into our agent in n8n here, which will then orchestrate the process of checking for calendar availability, creating and booking that appointment, and then finally logging patient details with that data that gets passed in. And so before we set this up in n8n, we really need to gather all that context and make sure that conversational voice flow sounds natural and is matching what we expect for the business, in our case, this dental practice that we're building it for. So let's jump over here to ElevenLabs and set up this new voice agent that's going to be responsible for handling all of that. So I already have this dental agent built out here that has the setup required, but I'm going to take you guys through the full process of creating this yourself because there's a lot that you can configure here, and I'm going to cover the important parts. So let's jump back, let's create a new agent and go through this setup process side by side. So I'm going to use a business agent here since we're building this n8n automation and voice agent for a dental practice. So we'll click that. If we go through this, we can see we have healthcare and medical. I'll click that. And our goal of this agent is to help out with appointment scheduling. So I'll click that as well. So we can just leave this as blank here. Main goal is to help. And it's going to use all of the pre-configured defaults that ElevenLabs has set up to really bootstrap this agent for us. So I'll give that a second to run here, and then we soon should be able to see all the config we need to go forward. The first thing I want to cover here is the voice tab that allows us to pick out a voice that we want to use for the conversational agent. I would recommend starting off by choosing one of these perfect for conversational AI voice models that are already configured inside of ElevenLabs, as they're going to be the most natural sounding. So you can preview them by clicking play here, or you can click here to find more voices and get that pulled into your own library. If you scroll down here, you're going to see a lot of different configuration options. Unless you really know what you're doing, I would recommend leaving these as default. Let's now go over to the Agent tab, as this is going to be the main configuration page for how you're guiding a new caller through the full workflow of getting an initial call all the way to booking their appointment. So, agent language, let's leave this at English. Additional languages, let's leave that blank. And then on the first message here, we're going to just give a simple intro. And so let me pull up what I have here on our agent from before. Our agent is going to be Casey, and we're going to welcome them in to Pearly White's Dental. So we have that set up right there. The next step is going to be where we build out our system prompt that this agent is going to follow. And so it's going to be important for us to configure all of the edge cases, really walk them through all of the context that this voice agent needs to accept phone calls and get a new patient booked. As you can see here at the pre-filled text area, we have personality, environment, tone, goal, some other context, guardrails, and finally tools. These are the core building blocks that ElevenLabs strongly recommends that you provide for every single voice agent that you've built out. This is going to be where you're spending the most of your time tweaking with, tuning, and configuring when you're trying to guide the agent to do what you want it to do. And so if we go over to the ElevenLabs docs, they have really great docs around how to prompt and how to build out a true personality and the desired behavior for your voice agent. Let's go through a couple of these notes very quick. So underneath the ElevenLabs voice docs, you can find this by going to elevenlabs.io/docs, go over to conversational AI, and then under this best practices tab, you can click on this prompting guide, which is going to take you through an explanation of each of these core 6 building blocks that you should be providing for every single voice agent that you're building. Something that I would highly recommend you do, instead of needing to write all this by hand, is go ahead and just copy and paste all of these docs here underneath this prompting guide, paste that into an LLM like Google AI Studio or ChatGPT, and then ask the LLM to help you write a really good prompt for the voice agent that you're building. That's the exact process that I followed when building out this voice agent for Pearly White's Dental, and it was able to follow these 6 building blocks and was able to take in and expand on the personality, the environment that we're trying to set up. And so if we go over to the docs again and go to environment, this is going to be the specific context, communication protocol, channel, and situational factors that the voice agent needs to consider in order to complete its job successfully. And so right now, underneath that pre-filled, boilerplate environment, not a whole lot going on here. It's just generic setup. And so when we're building out this voice agent, we really need to configure this to our business or to our client's business, so it's going to really be useful instead of just giving back a generic slop or unhelpful answers to the people calling in. So let me show you what we built out for our Pearly White's Dental environment section here. You are answering after-hour phone calls from prospective new patients. You can, and then we provide a bulleted list of what the agent is able to do. This is something that I didn't, write out myself. This is something that I got back from an LLM like ChatGPT after going through the process of pasting in those ElevenLabs docs and then roughly describing what I wanted my agent to do. And so I was able to go from a pretty rough idea of what this agent needed to complete to a detailed prompt like this, all from just meta prompting inside ChatGPT. So highly recommend following this process when you're working through a new agent workflow or a really complex prompt, because LLMs are ultimately going to be much better than many humans at building out prompts themselves. All of the setup was provided here from ChatGPT when I was going through this, including how it's going to interact with our system. So we're going to be able to provide and define this get availability that passes in a date tool. We have this create appointment tool that gives a starting timestamp and a patient name, and logging patient details, which is going to be responsible for logging the patient name, the insurance provider, a patient's question or concern that came in from the phone call, and the timestamp that the appointment is going to be booked for. That's all going to go on this Google Sheet we have built out here. And then if I go down further, we're giving just even more context around this environment, such as the system date time that ElevenLabs is going to dynamically insert here inside these brackets. And we're going to be providing this other context that all date and times are going to be in central time zone when they're booking. Going down through this prompt, we can go into the tone section, and this is a more personality-driven prompt where we're just trying to define what the speaker sounds like and give more control over that voice model. So professional, warm, and reassuring, speaking clearly at a slow pace, really trying to set this up as somebody that's easy to understand and really fits that persona of a very good receptionist. Going down further is into our goals section. And so if we go to the docs and expand on this, this is going to be where we establish objectives that guide conversations toward meaningful outcomes. This is where we want to be pretty detailed in building out how this agent is going to interact and what's kind of the flow chart it's going to follow when guiding the caller through a series of questions to get to this goal. And so we define this goal as efficiently schedule an initial appointment for each caller. And then under that, we have a couple subheadings that break down the distinct steps needed to get to that goal. And so our workflow here is pretty simple, but depending on your business or your client's business that you're building a voice agent for, this can go a number of different directions. And so before you get started prompting, I would recommend having a deep discussion with your client or have a deep understanding of your own business to know exactly what needs to happen to define a good goal. Because if your goal is muddy, this voice agent is not going to be very effective. You need to be specific, you need to be detailed. Otherwise, you're going to end up with unhappy customers who get stuck somewhere. So the way we've structured this is going to be determining the caller intent. This is a quick exit path where we can see if this person is here to book an appointment. If so, we're going to be able to handle that. Otherwise, this is going to be something that we just have to take a message and come back tomorrow to get back to that customer. So simple agent here, probably if this was going to be a production ready agent, we'd want to handle more of these cases outside of booking, but that's outside of the scope of what we're doing for now. On number 2, this is where we're going to set up the specific questions that the agent is going to ask and gather the context we need to really create an appointment in our own system. So number 2 here is going to be gathering patient information in order sequentially, asking 3 separate questions across 3 separate turns. And so basically what that means is we want our voice agent to ask 3 different questions that are going to get their first name, their insurance provider, and ask if they have any questions or concerns for Dr. Pearl. After that's done, we have this other fork on our workflow where we are going to ask if that customer has a preferred date to set their initial appointment with us. So we set a reminder here of what the current date and time is. And then we have this branching logic here that's going to ask, do you already have a date that works best for your first visit? If yes, we're going to get that date. We're going to then call into our tool and we're going to handle that response. So if that requested time is available, we're going to have our agent return a couple of different proposed time slots on that date that the user mentioned. So if I say, yeah, I'd like to book an appointment on Wednesday, we're going to reach out to n8n and get back a couple of different results for good time slots on that Wednesday date. And so they would come back with like either a 9 a.m. time slot, a 2 p.m. time slot, and then the user is able to proceed. And so all we're doing here is really building out this branching logic that is going to handle the common booking scenarios when going back and forth like you would with a real person to try and hone in on a date and time to set this appointment. On the next step here, still underneath this goal of establishing initial appointment, is going to be where we confirm and book the appointment. Much like what we're doing before, this is going to be the process where we make a tool call into our n8n workflow that goes into the process of these 2 systems talking back and forth with each other. And so if I go to the previous one, just to highlight this real quick for getting availability, this is going to be where our ElevenLabs agent makes a tool call and makes a request to our n8n system. We're going to process that request, route that request to the appropriate tool. And so this could be either getting availability, creating an appointment, or logging patient details, process that tool, send that response back so that the ElevenLabs agent is able to proceed with handling the rest of this conversation. So much like this, we're going to do the same thing when we confirm and book. And so once the patient accepts a time, run the create appointment tool with the provided date and time to start the appointment and the patient's name. We add some constraints here where we're going to say make sure the patient's name is included in that request and that we're not duplicating any tool calls here to avoid bad data flowing throughout the system. And so the request flow here is going to be started off inside of ElevenLabs. It's going to make a tool call to create an appointment that we've defined here. That tool call is going to make a HTTP post request into n8n for our webhook URL defined here. This agent is going to determine that this request is for creating an appointment. It's going to use this Google Calendar tool to actually create that appointment, give back the result, and then send this result back to ElevenLabs so we can see that what date and what time this appointment was confirmed to be booked at. So that covers the request flow here for how we go forward with creating and booking that appointment. This is going to be where we provide confirmation to the caller and give some final instructions that we want to pass along. And so we have this quote set up here where we want them to speak it in a friendly tone that says, "You're all set for your first appointment. Please arrive 10 minutes early so we can finish your paperwork. Is there anything else that I can help you with?" That's going to be spoken verbatim by our voice agent. And after that sentence is spoken, we finally go forward with logging all of the patient information that we've captured over the course of this phone call. And so we're going to say, go ahead and call the log patient details tool. So if I scroll down here, this is a tool that we have defined. It's a webhook tool. So it's again going to make a post request to our n8n workflow that is going to get routed to the agent, routed to this log patient details tool, where we actually insert a new row or update a row inside our Google Sheet that has all of the details passed in from ElevenLabs that were captured over the course of the conversation, and it gets logged up here. So that's the high level flow of all of the tool usage and how data is going to get shared between the two systems. When we go through here, we're going to go ahead and log the log patient details tool immediately after asking if there's anything else the patient needs help with, and make sure to use the patient's name, insurance provider, and any questions or concerns for Dr. Pearl, and confirm the appointment time. So that's how we're getting towards and nudging the agent closer to the end of this conversation and making sure that all captured context still gets logged here in the Google Sheet, so there's a record of what happened on these phone calls that were going on after business hours. And finally, ending the call, your goal is to conclude the call in a warm, professional, and reassuring manner, leaving the patient with a positive final impression. And so that's where we just give the agent the ability to end the call, transition to the end, and end on a positive note. So let's look at what Guardrails is. So Guardrails is going to be where we set boundaries, ensuring interactions remain appropriate and ethical. Really making sure that the ElevenLabs agent isn't going to go off the rails or do anything that we would not expect it to do if they were a real secretary trying to handle booking these appointments for us. So these are simple things we're able to set up. Again, this is going to be a really iterative process when you're building out your voice agent if you notice behaviors that you don't like or you need to steer a little bit further. And so, we're only going to book initial appointments for new patients. We don't want to give medical advice, as that could be, leading people to harm. Keep interactions focused, professional, and respectful. Don't overuse the patient's name while holding the conversation. You may only use log patient details once at the very end of the call after the patient confirmed the appointment time. So really setting in and defining and reinforcing the behavior that we want our voice agent to exhibit in real world scenarios. And going down here at the bottom is going to be an important one where we define the tools that are getting used by our voice agent. Like what we mentioned before, we have these 3 tools here that mirror what exists on our n8n workflow that are going to be get availability, create appointment, and log patient details. We're going to list out what each of these do by providing a brief description, having bullets here for what the arguments are going to be. And so get availability is going to take in a timestamp for when an appointment time could start, and it's going to return available time slots for that same day. And so the request flow here on a real human conversation is, yeah, I'd like to book for next Thursday. This tool is going to get called by passing in that next Thursday date. And if there are available time slots on that Thursday date, those are going to get returned here. And so we're stubbing out kind of what the request and response between the ElevenLabs system to n8n is going to look like when that tool gets used. Same thing here for creating the appointment. So if I highlight this tool for creating an appointment, we have a brief description of booking a 1-hour appointment in Central Time Zone, CST, and the arguments we pass in are going to be the timestamp we want that appointment to start with, as well as the patient name. Those details are going to get passed off to n8n, It's going to get routed to the appropriate tool inside here based off of what this agent decides. And then we're going to create this appointment with that provided timestamp, and the name is going to get passed in here on the title of the events getting created. And so all that context is required for us to proceed. Let's go to the last one here, which is going to be logging patient details. And so records patient info and the confirmed time slot that was booked. And for all the arguments that are getting passed in here, this is going to be patient name, insurance provider, any questions and concerns brought up by that patient, as well as the starting timestamp for this appointment that we're booking. So really everything that was captured here over the course of this entire phone call. So that covers it here for their prompt. We're going to share all of this in our school community, and so don't worry about needing to write all this down. Just join the free school community, and you'll be able to download this prompt for free. Let's go down to the tool setup, because this is going to be the next important part of this voice agent that is actually going to allow it to interact with outside systems. And in our case, that outside system is going to be n8n, and this agent we've set up here. And so much like what we did before, we need to define the tools that match the exact name that we specified here inside our prompt underneath this tool section. So get availability, create appointment, and log patient details all need to get created one for one underneath this custom tool section, so your agent is going to be able to work as expected. Otherwise, when you're talking to your agent, it's just going to say a generic message like, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to check for availability, and then it's going to error out there. So very important that you follow these setup instructions too. So the ElevenLabs agent and our n8n agent are going to be able to interact with each other. Let's start here with get availability. If we open this up, this is going to be set up as a webhook tool. And so if you click tool, you have an option here to do webhook or client. For our case, we need to do webhook because that's going to allow us to make an HTTP request from the ElevenLabs agent over to n8n and respond back with data that the ElevenLabs agent is going to be able to process and speak a real human response to. So we'll open this up, and we can see here underneath this configuration section where we're able to define all the data that's going to be passed into it. So the first thing to set up here is going to be our HTTP request that we need to configure. So I'm going to grab this URL we need from n8n, as the webhook trigger is going to be how n8n receives this data and sends data back. So we have our webhook trigger set up here. We go down to method, and we want it to be an HTTP post to easily send structured JSON data back and forth. And then the other important thing to note here is going to be this response section. Make sure this is set to using respond to webhook node. This allows us to wait for this agent to finish processing a request or use a tool like get availability, create appointment, get that response back, and then send that off to the responding webhook. So the ElevenLabs agent is going to be able to process that in the real spoken responses it makes. If you don't do this, there's going to be no data that gets returned, and then the ElevenLabs agent is just going to be guessing what it needs to do. It doesn't know if something was successful, unsuccessful, or if it was an invalid request. So very important that you have this respond to webhook node configured here. Go ahead and copy the URL, either test URL or production URL that you need to use. From here, paste that into the URL field for ElevenLabs, and that is going to configure this tool to make a request over to n8n. So set that up. Let's go ahead and make the name match what we defined in the prompt, and then give a brief description here on what this tool is going to do. Scrolling down here, there's a couple other sections where you're able to add in parameters. If this was going to be a real production agent that we're building, I think we'd want to go forward with adding in an auth header here that would allow us to protect our n8n logic and an access to internal systems by specifying an authorization or authentication header. This is just for prototyping purposes. I opted to skip that, but this is something you should strongly consider when building out a real-life voice agent. Going down further, the last step that I have configured here is going to be this body parameters section. This is where we define the data that's going to be, extracted from a conversation by the ElevenLabs agent and puts it into a structured format to get sent over to n8n. And so when we're checking for availability for a given time slot or a given day, what we're going to be doing here is passing in a timestamp and I have this tool name configured here that just makes it a little bit easier for our n8n agent to match what this request is. But the big thing that's going to be dynamic on this request is going to be this timestamp string that is defined. So we set the identifier to timestamp that matches what's up here. It's a string data type, and underneath the bottom here, we're going to tell it to extract it from the LLM prompt. So that's going to match what we define on our tool section for building out this ElevenLabs voice agent. I'll open this up again. We can scroll down here. We're marking the tool, we're marking this parameter as required, and then we're going to give it a brief description of what this field means so ElevenLabs is better able to match up and set the right data here. Very important that you're giving a specific and detailed description when you're building this out. Otherwise, you're going to run into cases where the data is jumbled or doesn't get passed through at all. Coming down to this bottom one, I have a constant variable defined for get availability, and this is just something that I built out for the agent I was working on because it made it easier for n8n to match up a given request. So if we pull this up and look at what's getting passed into this request data, we're going to see that the tool that's being called is log patient details. That's going to make it easier for this agent to go ahead and match up to this log patient details tool here, just to avoid any mismatches or accidental usage of the wrong tool. Not required, but I found this made my agent better at doing its job over many periods of testing. So that covers it here for our get availability tool. And then when going through the setup process here, we did the exact same thing for each of the other tools. So create appointment, we again define this initial config that's getting passed into that same n8n webhook URL. We're still defining a body here that's breaking down all the necessary context for an agent to really create an appointment on the calendar. So the starting timestamp, the patient name, and this constant tool name are all defined here. And we can still see that each of those properties get broken out below. So starting timestamp, LLM prompt, it's required. And then we give the detailed description. Patient name is also a required string with a patient name identifier and the detailed description below. And finally, for our constant tool name, we're specifying this as identifier tool, and it's going to be responsible for creating an appointment that matches what we have defined here inside our n8n workflow. And let's go to the last one here, which is going to accept even more parameters to log everything that was extracted from the voice conversation. So once again, all the setup is identical, where we define our name, the description, that exact same webhook URL that points to n8n. This is going to be what we copied here from before under test URL. Scroll down to the body, and we see this big definition built out here describing what every property of this request is going to look like. So when we log something, we need the starting timestamp, the patient name, the insurance provider, and any questions or concerns from the patient that were extracted over the course of our conversation. For each of those properties we defined, they all get listed out here, and we have each of those defined as strings with that same identifier, have it marked as required, and have a description built out for each. And so I'll scroll down here so you guys can see everything that's going on within this description field. And then finally, the log patient details value is specified as a constant here that matches up once again to our log patient details tool. When you're thinking through building a system like this, tools are going to be what allows you to interact with the outside world, and in our case, n8n. So depending on what kind of business you're working with, what are the requirements for that business, you may have other details going on here, like editing an appointment or things of that nature where data needs to get changed. It's very simple to extend this system even further to handle cases like that by just adding in a new tool, and then later in the n8n workflow, being able to specify that inside there. That covers up most of the setup we need to do inside of n8n for building out our voice agent. Once again, the thing that I want to clarify here for building out voice agents like this is that it is going to be an extremely iterative process. You're not going to get it right the first time. It's going to take a lot of testing of going through this full workflow to see what things go off, what hangups get hit. And so that's something I think you should be able to expect when building out systems like this. ElevenLabs makes it really easy to test that. Once you have your changes saved, you can click on Test AI Agent, click here to call, and then you're going to be able to speak back and forth with your voice agent as a real patient calling in. That covers it here for the ElevenLabs voice agent setup. I'm going to go ahead and share all of the prompts covered here so you have a good idea of how you can take a real looking system, extend it further, and see how all those tools are getting used. Next up, I want to get into more detail for the n8n workflow and show you guys how everything's glued together and how you can set up and extend these tools to build out your full agent for whatever case you're trying to handle. Like I mentioned before, this system is really built around the webhook trigger and the respond to webhook node at the very end that's going to take the output of the agent and send it back to ElevenLabs. And so just to rehash that, the big thing you need to do when setting up this n8n workflow is going to be setting this using respond to webhook node and then actually adding in a respond to webhook node that is going to use that data from the agent and pass it back to ElevenLabs. So very critical you set this up from the beginning, otherwise you're going to get unexpected behavior. Let's look at this agent node that we have set up here and go through how we thought through the prompting process to build this logic out. Inside n8n, agents work by using a chat model, an agent node, and a number of tools that you can hook up to the agent in order to execute and achieve your desired goal. And so the first thing that we start with for any agent we're building is going to be our system message and the user message that gets passed in. The user message in the agent for this case is going to be very simple. And if we go back to a previous execution, we can pull up and see what some real data is going to look like. So if we copy this into the editor, we can see that we're taking in the JSON.body property of a real request sent over from ElevenLabs and just expanding that out and formatting that JSON here. And so we're going to see whatever data was extracted from ElevenLabs is getting passed in, as well as the constant tool value that we specified before that gives us a good hint of what tool needs to be used. And so this is set up almost like a proxy or a forwarding system where the details from ElevenLabs get passed over to n8n, and then we're just going to actually implement and fulfill that request. So this data was extracted to log patient details. Let's give a hint for the tool that should be used. And then ultimately, our goal is for this agent to make a decision to use that same tool that was passed in. There's many ways you can approach agent building. That's one of the great things about it, as it's a very open, generic, dynamic way of handling user requests. This is the way that I decided to do it. And so if you guys like working with something better or have a better system of building this, I definitely want to hear about it in the comments below. So please leave a note if you have a great way to set this up. But moving forward here, let's move on to the system message, which is going to be a bit juicier and go through the full process of receiving that user request, which is the data getting passed in from ElevenLabs, how to think through that, how to handle that request, and how to route out to the appropriate tool that is ultimately going to end up with us checking for availability, booking an appointment, or logging patient details. And so underneath the role here, this is going to be how we're defining what is supposed to happen and what's our goal. And so you are an AI agent responsible for handling back office operations at the dental office, Pearly White Dental. You must make a decision about the data you receive and make a call into the appropriate tool in order to process this request and return the appropriate data necessary. So under here, just like what we were talking about before, we're going to receive this info, we're going to process it, and then we're going to return the appropriate data that the ElevenLabs voice agent needs in order to continue that conversation. You should look at the provided tool value in the request body to help you decide which tool to use. That's that hint we were talking about before. And then pay close attention to the constraints for the number of times a tool is able to be used. This next section that we've defined here is going to be the block where we define the tools that this n8n agent has access to interacting with. And so that's going to be Think. This is something built into n8n that allows the system to use some thinking tokens to better process and understand what request came in. This can just lead to more accuracy. And so I highly suggest you add in a Think tool. Pull this back up, have access to get availability, which is going to return true or false if the provided timestamp does have availability on that given timestamp. After that is done, we take this a step further for special instructions on get availability, where we're trying to return proposed timestamps if there is availability on that given timestamp. And so if we look back or think back to the conversation we had, I was saying, hey, I would like to book an appointment on Wednesday. If there is availability on Wednesday, we're going to define and tell our agent to go forward and check for a couple different slots that we can propose back to that person calling in, because it would be pretty weird if our voice agent was set up and the user had to specify, I want to book on, Thursday, July 17th at 3 p.m. It says no, and then the user has to propose another time. It would be best if the AI agent itself was able to check and give back some reasonable suggestions for open time slots. Much more natural and much more closely follows what like a real human booking experience would look like. So that's what we're doing here. It's a bit complex. All these prompts will be included, but we're really just enumerating what the process should look like after availability is true, and we want to propose 2 different timestamps. So we're setting up how the tool call usage should look like. We're defining what the response format should look like, and we're enumerating some edge cases that we expect could come up and how it should handle that. So that's what's happening there. That's probably the most complex one we have set up in this system, and I wanted to go through that in a bit more detail. The last 2 here are going to be the right actions, where we actually create an appointment and then log patient details. Very simple explanation of what it's doing. You should create a 1-hour appointment event for the provided start time, and then under log patient details, you should log the provided call details and patient details to a Google Sheet. Other thing to note here at the bottom is going to be for each tool that we do have defined, we're going to go ahead and say matches the name of the tool, so log patient details, tool value provided, and the initial request. And so we have that defined here. And then if we look at the request again, log patient details is going to be where we're hinting at it to look. Just trying to make the agent's job a little bit easier to decide which tool it should be using after it makes that initial request. Let's now go through each of these tools we have set up here so you can see a little bit more about how data goes from a dental agent into a real tool usage itself. So if we pull up get availability, we're going to see that we have a Google Calendar connected, tool description set to automatically. Under resource, we're going to be looking at our calendar and then using the availability operation. So this built-in tool for Google Calendar really takes in a start time and an end time. I have this set to be defined automatically by the model, and then pass in a description of what this should be. This is where really like the superpowers come into play when working with AI agents inside of n8n. If you just give a brief description and say defined automatically by the model, it's going to be able to analyze what request data comes in, pick out the best timestamp to use, and then pass that off to Google Calendar. And so you're not needing to do a bunch of, regex parsing or advanced logic inside of real code in order to get that timestamp. You're able to just to give a plain English description of what it should be, and the AI model is going to take care of the rest. End time is set up very similar. So the end time will always be the start time plus 1 hour. We're not even passing in the end time to this request, but since we're defining a good description here and saying it's defined automatically by the model, it's going to know how to set that end time in relation to the start time from before. So that's all there is to it. Super easy to get up and running with a new tool here inside your AI agent. And so where this gets really powerful is as your voice agent requirements change over time and you need to add a new logic, it can be as simple as adding in a new tool here, even something custom like calling into a separate n8n workflow, passing in the data you need in order to extend that further. So that's the true power of AI agents compared to building out a really long, structured, sequential workflow. Let's go to the next one and see what that looks like under Create Appointment. Under the top sections we have defined here, it's going to be extremely similar, but instead of a calendar resource this time, we're going to be using the event resource and the create operation to add a new event into the calendar. To set this up, we're going to go ahead and define the start and end timestamps with a description, much like before in the get availability tool. And this one, I'm also specifying that it's going to be in the central time zone. Same thing for the ending timestamp we have defined here, also wanting that to be in CST. So we have a good 1 hour block that we know is going to get scheduled together. At the bottom here, in order to set the title, we just define this summary field under additional fields. We're going to let this be automatically defined by the model so that data can be dynamically passed through without any complex operations on our side. And then we just give a brief English description of what this should look like. And so the title and summary of this event should be in the format of, in quotes, dental appointment, pipe, patient name, where the patient name is the data we're dynamically passing in and extracting from that agent request. And so just by specifying a super simple template like this, the AI agent is going to need to know that it should be filling in that value dynamically. And then when that event gets created on our calendar, it's going to use that Lucas name that was extracted from the caller itself. So very powerful, very extendable if you need more data passing through. And that's what allows us to make this system so dynamic. Let's go to the last one, which is going to be a call into a Google Sheet tool where we are going to use a sheet resource, and then we're going to go ahead and append a new row or update an existing row. And so as the phone call proceeds with our agents, what we're going to be doing is extracting data like the patient name, when the call timestamp happened, the insurance provider, the questions and concerns, and the booking timestamp, and trying to set that into a single row like we have defined here. So as soon as that phone call ends, we have a log of everything that was discussed for somebody at the dental office to review, just to make sure everything's working correctly. This is something that's pretty easy to set up just with plain English descriptions like we covered before. The final thing that I want to cover here is actually this simple memory node that we set up here that I think can play a huge part in some of these multi-step operations, such as checking for availability. Since the Google Calendar tool for getting availability only returns a true or false, our request flow for building up and proposing 2 different timestamps on an available day does require the dental agent to reach out to this get availability tool multiple times. We added in this memory node here so we can see what the result of getting availability on, say, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. is going to look like. And so it's not repeating those calls into the tool and leading to excessive usage. By specifying just a simple memory node and defining a key here, we're able to save up a large context window of all the decisions previously made in that API call up to this point. And so by specifying context window.length is equal to 10, and by looking at the webhook trigger and grabbing this Cloudflare Ray CF-Ray value, we're able to see for a single request that comes in, the 10 most recent messages that were processed by our agent. And so if something like an availability check for, tomorrow at 9 a.m. has been done already, we don't have to go back to that tool once again to find that out. That's already going to be in our memory for later usage that the agent is able to see and avoid making multiple tool calls. So it can be a little bit of a complex process, but this can help lead to a lot more accuracy as your agent is getting scaled out and you have more complicated tool workflows getting built out in your system.
All right, before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Seriously, do it, because we're gonna be breaking down all of the AI automations that we use to run all of our businesses. They're super helpful, and we're gonna break down exactly how we do them on this YouTube channel. So make sure like and then subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we publish new workflows that can make your businesses run 20 times more efficiently, just like we're seeing here at the recap and the other businesses that we're running. The other item is join our school community for free. The link's in the description. You'll be able to get this template, this automation that we just ran through in this video, completely for free. You can go to school and navigate to the video that you want, and then you can download the JSON output for the n8n automation. With that, you can upload it into your n8n, clone it, and then tune it for your business and your use cases. So like and subscribe, join our free community to get this automation for yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.